A philosopher and I recently had a conversation about death. I don't think you can talk about death without talking about life, she said. What do you mean? I asked. Well, death is like a continuation of life. I wondered about that. Don't we die when life ends? I asked. Yes, but we die because life ends. So if we weren't alive, we wouldn't have to die in the first place, she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I just feel like we think about death as if it's this horrible thing. But what if death is our normal state and life is this weird thing that happens in the middle? Can you say more about that? I asked. Sure, we're dead before we're born, and we're dead after we die. So I just feel like death gets a really bad rep because if you think about it, it's not really death that kills you, right? It's life that kills you. Okay, I said. So if we imagined a less rigid boundary between life and death, do you think people would fear it less? Probably, she said, wisely. This philosopher is 10 years old, an elementary school student. And several of you might be wondering, children, philosophy, what? And I get it, right? Philosophy is often thought of as this abstract, rigorous discipline, which it is, that helps us think about the world and our place in it. We don't usually imagine children as natural philosophers or philosophers at all, but they are. They ask questions that are naturally philosophical all the time. Here are some questions that my 4th and 5th graders have asked in the last few months. What does dying feel like? Would you rather age old, get old, but with sadness, or live a good, happy life and die of old age? Is the future already set in stone because of past events? What color is nothing? Like out in space with nothing, what color is that? Is there such a thing as déjà vu? And what do you see when you're blind? This is probably my favorite. If you went into a time machine and went back in time to before you went into the time machine and made it so you couldn't go into the time machine, what would happen? And the classic, is there such a thing as free will? As adults, we need to do better to nurture these questions both at home and at school. But the problem is we don't. We don't believe that children are capable of deep and complex thinking, and we couldn't be more wrong. I think part of the problem is reimagining what philosophy is. Studying philosophy is really different from doing philosophy. We study philosophy when we take a class in existentialism, but we do philosophy all the time. Every time you wonder about yourself, your life, the world, and beyond, you're doing philosophy. Every time you reflect on these questions by yourself or in a community, you're doing philosophy. And the other thing is, there's usually multiple answers to a single philosophical question. We revisit what we think we know, and through a process of dialogue, we reconstruct and refine some of these ideas. And the thing with this process is that it pulls us into uncertainty, and it makes us really vulnerable. All things, I can assure you, adults hate feeling. So imagine if I asked you out to coffee and said, hey, let's spend an hour talking about a question to which we are unlikely to find an answer to, and you will probably have to question everything you think you know, so be prepared to be uncomfortable. I'm sure you would question your decision to have coffee with me. But children, on the other hand, are naturally open and curious and much more willing to change their minds. And it is this courage that allows them it's really just this courage that allows them to explore multiple possibilities and speak their minds without wondering about, am I getting it right? Imagine if you could learn without being judged or evaluated. Revolutionary, right? I've been working with the University of Washington Center for Philosophy for Children for several years. And in this time, I've had countless opportunities to engage in rich conversations with children from kindergarten through high school on topics such as beauty, justice, the meaning of life. And we think that children aren't capable of having these conversations, but they are. In a typical session, we sit together in a circle. I like to sit on the rug on the floor of a classroom. And this becomes our community of philosophical inquiry. I start off with presenting a prompt, and that could be a story, a thought experiment, a game even. And then I ask my students if this inspires any questions for them. I make a list of the questions, put it up on the board, and then we pick one to discuss for the rest of the session. For example, in a third grade class, we read a chapter from the book Wonder. Now, Wonder is a story about a homeschooled boy, Augie. Augie is going to school for the first time in 6th grade. Now, Augie has a serious medical condition which affects, amongst other things, the appearance of his face. So it is for the first time he's having to negotiate other people's responses to his face outside his friends and closest family. So the question that we settled on as a class was, what does it mean to be normal? And what followed was a really, really rich conversation about societal expectations and conformity, differences, and why we're so uncomfortable with difference. Is it possible for all of us to be unique while being normal at the same time? My students seem to think so, and they suggested that we adults need to broaden our definition of normal to mean more than just like everybody else. Research confirms that participating in philosophical inquiry has a range of benefits for students, right? It develops critical and creative thinking, it fosters skills in listening and empathy, and it boosts your skills in perspective taking and civil dialogue. And these are benefits that we want our students to have in classrooms all the time, every day, right? The teachers that I work with also believe that their students are capable of complex thinking and will often tell me that their quietest students speak up the most in philosophy. One of my students even went up to the librarian and asked specifically for a philosophy book recommendation. Some of my best days are when I walk into a classroom to hear kids yell, "Yay, philosophy!" Or I'm walking down the hallway and one of my students will stop me and say, "So you remember that conversation we were having last week? I have a new perspective on it, and I want to tell you right now." The other day, a 2nd grader came up to me and said, "So, can you say that you saved someone if you were the one to put them in danger in the first place?" Good question, right? But this work is not easy. Our conditioning runs deep, and despite my training, there are days when I don't get it right. I've had to unlearn and relearn several skills while doing this work. I've had to learn how to listen to children, truly listen to them, and center their voices, not mine. I've had to learn the power of silence. I've had to learn how to hold myself back when it's been more tempting to jump in. I've had to learn to trust my students to direct the conversation and to do it well. But I have a personal motivation for doing this work. Like my students, and I'm sure like all of you, I too had questions as a child. Do you see the same green that I see? Classic, right? What happens after we die? Why are we here? Why is it not okay to ask people about God? And unfortunately, I had no one to talk to I had no one at home to ask these questions to. School was actually worse. The only questions we were allowed to ask were those relating to content that would appear on a test. And it made me wonder, right? Am I weird? Why is it that no one wants to talk about the things that matter to me? When I think about the adults in my life at that time, they fit into one of two categories. Ones that listened to me, like really listened to me and took me seriously, and those that dismissed me, even if they did it kindly. And the ones that listened to me gave me respect, a privilege that I had believed was reserved only for adults. And they made me feel like my thoughts have value and helped me develop confidence in my voice, which has been a priceless gift as an immigrant woman of color. And I realized that that's the kind of adult I wanted to be. And that's why I decided to do the work that I do. As I got older, I realized that there were very few spaces where children were taken seriously, even at school, an institution where they spend so much of their time. What message does that send them? And what are we doing about it? People will often come up to me and say, "Wow, your kids are so wise." And it's true, they are. Children already have a natural ability to wonder about life's big questions. But it's our job as adults to create a safe space for them to do it in. But as adults, we wonder about stuff too, right? All the time. But we filter and edit ourselves because we live in a culture that is so consumed with perfection and efficiency at the expense of wonder. But the irony is, we're also asked to develop this childlike curiosity, the same childlike curiosity that we systematically squash little by little over time. What if we nurtured this curiosity? What if we let it thrive? The good news is, you can have a philosophical conversation with anyone, anywhere. You can ask someone what they're wondering about when they're reading a book. You can discuss a question over lunch, or in my case, coffee. Or you might ask someone what they think about something while running errands together. Show someone what they think is important, and they might surprise you. I would like to ask all of you to take a moment, really take a moment now, and think about a time when you wondered about something out loud and truly felt listened to. Now, go and make a young person feel the same way. Thank you.